Then I worked for a little IoT company, but I've delivered products at IBM, then Microsoft, then SAP. And SAP is the reason that I moved to Germany. I've been here over 10 years and have a consulting and training company. I work almost exclusively with global B2B companies. So I really feel at home in the enterprise B2B space. My latest baby is career.pm. You can read the tagline. We're just launching. If you're curious, just take a look at the site, dig around a little bit. I would love to hear your feedback. You can find me online very easily. Would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. So do that. And being an agile kind of guy, I thought I would approach this as kind of a backlog. I say kind of because I've prioritized 4 things that I really want to talk about. And for the rest of these things, I thought maybe we would open it up to the audience. So take a look at these things on the right. And maybe when I'm done talking about the other things, just through chat, folks can ask me to speak about any one of these, or if there's something else you want to talk about, I'm happy to do that as well. So these are the things that I will take you through, these first 4, just step by step. I'm not sure, like, it's tough for me to pay attention to the chat window and stuff, so, but I'm happy to stop at any time and answer questions. So let's go. What is the first mistake that I see? I thought I would be kind of provocative here. I really believe this, but it's shocking for a lot of people to see this. So the biggest mistake I see is excessive focus on the customer. And that sounds contrary to everything you hear. All we hear about is customer, 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 customer. But I am going to make the case today that that's cheap talk. It is usually imprecise. They're not really talking about the customer. And as a product manager, you have to really be aware. And I can hear somebody typing. Just a note, somebody might be best to go on mute. And I'm going to start with a definition. And from there, we will define what a customer is. And this is the definition of a market. So as a product manager, you need to be as aware of the market as you are of the customer. And these are different things. So the market is defined by your product category. It's all the entities, people, businesses, governments in the world who have the means and interest to buy your product. So they're interested in it because they perceive value, and means that they have the money, it's available to them, those kinds of things. That's the market. And this is the way things break down. You've probably seen a diagram like this. There's something we call the TAM, which is everybody in the world, all these entities in the world who could buy your product. Fact is, a lot of companies don't really have global reach, so there's this idea of a serviceable addressable market, the part of the market you really could get to. And finally, we have the customers, which are a subset of the market. You can think of them as a segment of the market. And it depends on the market you're in, but in most markets, your customers are a small percentage of the overall market. They're the ones who have drunk the Kool-Aid. They have bought your product. There are a bunch more entities out there that have not. And you have to balance your focus. You have to balance your effort between the people who have bought your product and the people who could buy your product. Because over time, they can have different needs. If you've heard of this concept of the chasm, that's the idea, that early adopters have one set of needs, you can meet those needs without meeting the needs of the broader market, and you will stop growing. So if you're satisfied with your clientele, you have all the customers you ever want, you don't need to pay attention to this point. If you would like to grow, you need to understand the market as well as your customers. And as you're planning the evolution of your product, make sure that you have something for both of these sets of folks, because very often they will just want different things. That happens all the time. Takeaway, markets and customers are not the same thing. And a lot of times when people, very smart people, are using the word customer, what they really mean is market. If you look at the business model canvas, it talks about customer segments. Well, you can segment your customers, but I think what you want to do, especially as a startup, is segment the market. What are the different parts of the market that you can go after? So as a summary, The term customer is used very imprecisely, and it's conflated with this idea of a market. Customers are a very important stakeholder to you, but they're only one customer. And the truth is, you can make your customers very happy and still fail. You might have an offering that customers love, but management sees as not being on strategy. You will fail. So you need to think holistically about all your stakeholders, especially in the enterprise space, and make sure that you are satisfying each of them enough that you can go forward and succeed. And another tip I would give you is that as a product manager, be the expert on your market, not just the customers. A lot of people in engineering, sales know the customers really well. Very few people really understand the market. So first mistake is focusing too much on the customer. Next mistake that I see a lot of product managers making is not managing their time. So it's just a fact. If you're good as a product manager, there will be unreasonable requests for your time. When I was a product manager, I would say half my calendar was probably double or triple booked, at least. People will want you for all kinds of things. You are the hub of the product team. When people need guidance, when they want to know where the product's going, when they want to understand the strategy, and a million operational things, they will come to you. If you cannot manage your time effectively, if you cannot say no to people, you will fail. We called it a denial of service attack. So many people wanting my time that I couldn't do my job well. The product suffered, the business suffered. And that's just a fact. There's a lot of talk in the kind of product management literature about saying no to the customer, saying no to stakeholders, especially around features. But I can tell you that if you cannot say no to people around your time, the fact that you can say no about features won't matter much, because you will be so underwater that you simply can't act in an effective way. It's a distributed denial of service attack, and really smart product managers know how to avoid that. And all of us have probably seen somebody. A great example of this is salespeople. They're just coin operated. When they start a conversation, they're asking themselves, is there money in this conversation for me? And if there's not, they move on. We've all seen professionals that are like that. They focus on the things that are going to make them successful, and they don't do anything else. And more times than not, they are more successful than people who don't manage their time well. So the tips I would give you there is really think about what is important, know how you're going to measure success, and laser focus on that thing. Sometimes you're going to have to tell people no, even your management. Be empathetic. Tell them you understand they would like your time, but there are just other more important things that you need to do. So when you say no, and you should say no a lot to your time, regarding demands on your time, it's not about not caring about people or just being selfish, but everybody wants a piece of you. And if you want to be successful, you need to pick, where you're going to invest the limited energy that you have. And make sure you're aligning with your leadership, because eventually some of this stuff, I can tell you from experience, gets escalated, and you need to have a shared set of goals with your leadership so that you can say, look, I am not going to do B because we talked about how important A is this month or this quarter or whatever it is. So manage your time brutally first, and it will make managing your product a lot easier. You will be a lot more effective. The third thing I complain about all the time, I do a lot of product management training, and this comes up at least 100 times in 3 days. And that is this idea of operational overload. And what happens is that over time, there are so many operational demands on your time that you stop thinking and acting strategically. You are essentially on a treadmill, and that is a horrible place to be. You're wearing yourself out. You're not really making forward progress, and certainly not doing things that are strategic. And that means the rest of, especially internal stakeholders, look at you and they just see you as like the kind of customer meeting monkey or the requirements monkey. They don't see you doing strategic things. And almost every product manager that I know is in this situation. It takes a lot of discipline and maturity to say, you know what, I am going to take some of my time and I am going to act and think strategically. So there are different things you can do. What I found valuable was on my calendar, I would mark out time, 3 or 4 hours a week, and that time was sacrosanct. I would not reschedule it. And all I did in that time is strategic stuff. It wasn't a time to catch up on other stuff, wasn't a time to read a book. It was time to think about what I needed to do strategically to move my product forward. And if you think about it in terms of a week, 3 or 4 hours still isn't enough. So something you can do is take a look at your calendar, let's say for the last 2 weeks. If you use Outlook, there are different ways you can mark up or color meetings. Go through and mark up all the meetings that were really about something strategic, all the demands on your time that you consider strategic. You will probably be shocked at the low percentage of your time that you are actually thinking and acting strategically. Most of what we end up doing is operational, and it's a trap. You will be under optimized, and eventually when people come looking for the strategy and it's not ready, they will blame you. So first you have to understand what a strategy is, what's, kind of strategic efforts are, what is operational, and you have to establish a balance between these. This is very closely related to the time management topic that I spoke about as well. Finally, what I see, this is something that is just not on people's radars. We are so focused on our stakeholders, on our product, that we forget that we have a career. And a career is not a job. Your company owns your job. They have given you a job and you should do it. Your career, most often, especially in tech, spans jobs. So every once in a while, you need to stand back. And the way I phrase it is you need to think about your career the way you think about your product. So your product will not be successful if there's no strategy, there's no roadmap. But when I talk to product managers, this is how I feel. Most of them are kind of have this infant level awareness of their career, and it's just this thing that's kind of flopping around. And if they slip, it will just fly away. There's just nothing there. They're waiting for opportunity to come knocking. They haven't thought deeply about what their next step is, what the gaps are, what's preventing them from getting there. And, there's just no plan in place. So if I or you spoke to a product manager and said, where is your product roadmap? And they say, I don't have one. We're just kind of doing whatever comes our way. And they also don't have a strategy, you would not take them seriously as a product manager. So you should apply that exact same perspective to your career. What are you trying to get out of this? What direction do you want to go? And put a plan in place. Most of us aren't able to, execute and change our entire professional life in 2 months or 3 months. Without a plan, you are just reactive. If it changes, it will be a matter of luck. Even in a hot job market, you can very easily get sucked into doing a job that isn't strategic for you, that won't get you to the next step, that if you would have thought about it, you would have identified. And it helps you make decisions. So I won't belabor this, but you should sit back for a while and think about your career the way you've learned to think about your product, and actively manage it, drive it, PM your career. So those are 4 topics. Those are, I see the people making these mistakes left and right. A lot of what I've done as a consultant is address the first 3. Now with Career PM, I'm helping people address this problem, how they manage their career. So I hope those things are helpful. And now I wonder if I list these last 4, can we on the fly in some creative way vote on which one we talk about? As you look at these, maybe we just take the first couple that chat. I mean, I don't think voting is built in to Zoom. I don't know. Yeah, can you give me some indication of which of these you would like me to address? And we'll just keep going as, time allows. I don't know if I can get back to chat. This thing kind of new share. I don't want to do that more. Let's see if over here.
I'll speak up for you. So some of us are saying fourth, and some of us are saying second.
Okay,
Sadly,
let's start with those two. That's simple enough. We'll do 2 and 4. So this is a big one. I would say the biggest mistake I personally made in my career had to do with number 2. So we all have internal stakeholders that are important to us. They are critical. Critical stakeholders by definition can, make the difference between success and failure of our product. And in my case, I got hired by a big company. It was a new project, completely new product development on a technology that wasn't particularly adored in that organization. And I was the first product manager in that organization. There were over 1,000 people. So our team, even from the beginning, had tens of developers. And what I was spending my time doing was basically fighting for our lives. Along with our kind of general manager, I was going to a lot of meetings. There was a lot of churn. So every few months, I had to go back to a new set of leadership and explain what I was doing. But the upshot is I was doing all the right things, keeping our product alive. I was not doing the traditional product manager things well. I had a small team of new people. And what happened is I really disappointed engineering. They were actually excited to have a product manager. And I got so randomized with these other things that they were disappointed. And by the time I figured that out, it was too late. I had lost a lot of credibility. There was a lot of animosity. It was not a good situation. What I should have done, and what I recommend that you do, is for your most important stakeholders, maybe for you it's engineering and UX, or engineering and sales, is to sit down with them, especially at a new job. This is really effective. Go to engineering leadership and say, what do you expect out of me in the next 100 days? Or what do you expect out of me this year? I really want to know what's important to you, because there are a million things I can do. I would like to align what I'm doing with what generates value from you, for you. So if I would have done that with engineering leadership early on, if I would have explained what I was doing, I thought they knew about it because they were being kind of informed. But once again, it was too late when I found out that they were just really not happy. So figure out, this is an exercise, figure out who your top 3 internal stakeholders are. Might be engineering, sales, and executive leadership. And go to them and just ask that question. What do you expect out of me in the next 6 months? What do you really feel like you need from me? Take that into account and then manage to those expectations. People understand you're busy. If you can't do it, that's fine. But go back to them before the deadline and say, look, things have changed. I'm having to do this. If I would have done that, I would have saved myself an immeasurable amount of pain, because having a bad relationship, disappointing people never feels good. So that is that one. Let me see if I can get this out of the way. And then we can discuss all of these maybe when I'm done. Lack of understanding the problem. So we as humans have this innate tendency to jump in and think about the solution. We are product managers, not problem managers. But without an understanding of the problem, there is no way you will develop the ideal solution. And if you want longevity in your industry, if you want folks to respect you, if you don't want to get yanked around every time there's some new fad or trend or technology, understand the problems that you're solving. You should know the top 3 problems your product solves, not what it does. That's what, if I asked you today, that's what you would tell me. But you should have a very crisp answer for the 3 problems your product solves. And you should spend at least as much time understanding problems as you spend trying to understand the solution. And the problem space is much more stable than the solution space. Solutions change all the time. We have the same problems people have always had. Google Maps solves a problem of being lost. People, animals, time immemorial, people have been getting lost. What we have is new solutions. So be the expert on the problems you're solving and for whom. In the B2B space, You're solving problems for the decision maker, for the user, for the administrator, for the people who manage users, a bunch of different people, and you should really understand those problems deeply. It will give you insight you can't get any other way, and will help you really make a product that solves their problems. I could talk about this problem thing for a day. It's that important. But don't just think about the solution. Make sure you deeply understand the problems that you're solving and be able to rattle them off. PMs can be very arrogant people. A great way to kind of put them in their place is just ask them, what problems does your product solve? And most of them will have to think about it way too long. They don't know. It's not just kind of second nature to them. So those were those two. I'm happy to talk about anything else. Happy to answer if there are any questions about what I've discussed. It's probably 5:30 here in Germany. I'm perfectly happy to go get a cold beer and start my weekend as well. Oh, this went pretty fast. So we're 20 minutes in. Questions?
So we can put up the questions in chat section. I'll read them, or you can just open up your mic and directly speak.
I would love to do that. Like I see this control thing up here, but I don't see anything that takes me to chat. I'm just too dumb to use this thing, I guess.
I'll read the questions.
Okay.
So first we have question from Manas. Can you share some more examples of problem solutions you talked about?
Yeah. So let's pick, we can pick PowerPoint. So we all know what PowerPoint does, and it does a lot of stuff, right? Lets me make slides, basically, lets me record stuff. But the problem that it solves is that I would say is that some information is not well communicated via a bunch of text, via like a word processor. It needs to be more exciting. It needs to be more concise. I need to be able to tell a story. And just like a book has pages, a presentation has different slides. So that is one of the problems that needs to be solved. If I look at something like WhatsApp, a lot of us use WhatsApp. What is the basic problem that it solved? Well, there was a lot of chat out there, but it was in prison in these different applications. And what they did is they factored it out. They took it out so that it's just about chat. They made it super easy to use. They gave you some security in that you have to have a phone number to set it up. And those were the problems that got solved. And once you identify the problems and understand them, there are other people that may have come up with other solutions. If you really understand the problems, it then becomes thinking about different solutions and picking the best one. And the best one is the one that meets the needs of the market and meet your needs as well. So any product that you use, you should think about the problems that it's solving. A lot of people have heard of jobs to be done. To me, that's just problem analysis kind of described with different words. So every product solves a problem, and you need to understand those problems fundamentally, ideally better than your competitor, because we can all make mistakes. We can see somebody struggling with something, and we may spend a lot of time trying to help them, trying to get them to overcome something when they really have a deeper problem. We're solving something that isn't their biggest problem, or even worse, in the end, we don't solve their problems. We address some of the symptoms, but we don't address the fundamental problem. So I hope that helps.
Next, there is question from Saurabh. He would like to hear some insights about insufficient market segmentation.
Oh, okay. This I see a lot. I've, in the past year, started a couple of startups. I've done coaching with startups, and this is what I hear them say, and this applies every bit as much to product managers in B2B. Who are you going to sell this to? Doctors. Oh, okay, it's designed for doctors. Great. What kind of doctors? Doctors in what location? Doctors in what financial situation? doctors with what size practice. So we know that there's this group out there, doctors or administrators or developers or whatever segment, wine drinkers in my case. But not all wine drinkers are created equal. And especially if you're creating something new, a way to almost guarantee failure is to try to meet the needs of the entire market. You will fail. There are cohorts. So we talked about what a market is. A segment is a cohort, a group of people inside that market that have similar requirements or priorities. And one of the startups I started has to do with drinking wine. So I could say, hey, I'm building this for wine drinkers. But the truth is, there are wine connoisseurs. There are middle-aged people who drink a lot of wine and spend a lot of money. There are younger people who want to know about wine but don't want to spend a lot of money. There are occasional wine drinkers. And we had to ask ourselves, who are we aiming at? And why is it important? Because it allows you to focus. It's about focus. I can focus the product that I build and make it as small as I can, make it for one segment, and then think about kind of attacking the others. I can focus my marketing spend. So do I market on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn? Well, if I want to get to everybody, I go through Facebook. If I want to get to older people, Facebook is probably a good platform. Instagram probably isn't. If I want to get to young people, Instagram these days is probably the place to go. It's still kind of hot. And then if you're in the B2B space, you have to focus your salespeople. Who should they be talking to? So having this grand vision that we are going to sell this to airports is not enough. You have to look at these segments or dimensions of segmentation and say, we are going to market this to medium-sized airports in Central Asia. Then you've got something. So we're going to do them, and we're going to do large airports in North America that are blah, 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 that are within 50 miles of a major city, whatever. You can focus. Do not try to boil the ocean. Do not try to solve the entire market's problems in one go. Know what the segments are. Know which ones are most attractive to you, which are a best fit. Focus on them. And, it's usually not that simple. You usually don't get to just focus on a single segment, but focus on a couple of segments that are important to you. And where this helps is in decision making. So during the release, we're building software, we're going to release it. At some point, we will run out of steam. There is something that we wanted to deliver that we won't be able to deliver. And that's where we have to sit back and say, we can do A or B. If we do A, we are going to alienate our key segment. So we're not going to do that. That kind of thing helps you focus and make decisions. I hope that helps.
Right. Next, we have a question from Sumit. Hi, Greg. Can you throw some light on having good product strategy?
Yes. So to have a good product strategy, you need to understand what a strategy is in the first place. So we throw that word around all the time. We throw the word vision around. We throw goal, objective around. And I think almost everybody has their own kind of perception or intuition about what that is. So the first thing you need to do is level set on what a strategy is. And what I use is the Object Management Group's business motivation model. So it's a spec. You can go out and find it. Just type OMG business motivation. And, it talks about business planning in a fairly broad context. What I've gotten the most value out of is their definition of these basic terms like vision and strategy. So they define ends first, and that's what you should always define first. Your vision is kind of the overarching thing you would like to achieve. Goals are general things you would like to achieve, and then metrics are time-bound and measurable. So I define what I want to achieve, and the strategy is a different thing. It's a means. It's a way that I achieve those things. So first, having a solid understanding of what you're building and the order that you should go in is important. If you can get the rest of the organization to use that same paradigm, now you're in a much better place to align strategies. So for a product strategy, I would start with the ends. I would think about what my product vision is, and I like the ones that describe to me what is the world like if I'm successful. Define a set of goals, and not all of them are financial. Important ones are definitely financial. How much do you want to make? What kind of margin? That kind of thing. But also, where are the geographies you want to make a difference? Do you want to be a thought leader? All kinds of things like that. So figure out what you want to achieve, how you will measure success. So goals are general things. You might have a goal would be something like, I would like to increase revenue. An objective would be, I want to increase gross revenue in the Americas by 20% by the end of the year. I can measure that. And if I achieve my objectives, I'm moving my goal forward, which moves my vision forward. Then I have to describe a strategy, and people are not used to doing this. It's difficult the first time. But a strategy would sound something like, we will start with aggressively priced deals in Asia, get some reference accounts. We will then look at penetrating larger accounts in North America, and we'll start partnering to broaden our offering to better serve that market. Those are the steps or the plan of action that I have to achieve my ends. And I've suggested a structure, but building a strategy is a very difficult and creative process. So the trick is to get something on paper and revisit it until it gets to kind of a steady state. And it will get to the point where it isn't changing every week. So I would think about what I want to achieve. I would think about the course of action that will get me there. I would use the business motivation model concepts to do that. I would get the rest of the organization to do the same thing so that I can align with them. And I would build a kind of hygiene practice around it that says every quarter, product management, head of engineering, and leadership will sit down and look at our motivation model. And if nothing has changed, if we're still good with it, fine, it's a short meeting. But if something needs to be tweaked, we talk about it regularly. And you as the product manager have to drive your product strategy. Even in the absence of an organizational strategy, you don't have an excuse. You have to define it. And it has to be written down or it doesn't matter. It doesn't help anybody but you if it's in your head. You need to write it down and then massage it to show it to different audiences. An important audience is engineering, sales, marketing. You need to take this thing and present it to them in a way so that everybody in engineering knows what you're trying to achieve, knows basically how you're trying to achieve it. And that helps them make smarter decisions. And by the way, makes you look like a leader instead of just the kind of requirements monkey. So I covered a lot there. Get the OMG business motivation model, look at it. I have other vlogs on the topic. I've probably written something about it. First step is to figure out how you're going to capture and understand the concepts and then do it.
So next we have a question from Vamsi. What sources do we refer to get much understanding of product your organization wants to implement?
Would you repeat that?
Yeah. What sources do you refer to get much understanding of product your organization want to implement?
So you're trying to figure out which products your organization wants to implement? Is that right?
So he want you to share some resources of understanding products your organization wants to implement.
Wow. Yeah, I have a little trouble. I'm not sure why following the question, but by resources like, I don't know, things to read and stuff, I don't have anything handy. I mean, yeah, to figure out what your organization, I mean, it's usually you kind of know what your organization wants to deliver, right? And, that should be informed. You should understand the strategy. So if you're looking for something new that your organization might want to implement, I would look at their strategy. I would look at my strategy, the organizational strategy. I would look at my core competencies. And then I would start trying to find market problems that are compelling. So what are the problems that are in the market that are worth solving? And that is a lot of work. And in this case, I would say even there, a better way to phrase the question, and I'm still not sure I understand it, is, the question is kind of solution oriented. Like, what products do I want to build? Maybe a more interesting way to think about that is, what problems does my company want to solve? What are the problems that are relevant to us? And then start thinking about how you could solve those problems. But if they're asking for actual resources, nothing comes to mind. But I'm sorry, I just struggle with the question a little bit.
Hi, Greg. Sorry, I'm just jumping in. This is Talvinder. I'm the founder of Pragmatic. I was listening keenly on your answers. Very, very insightful. I just thought I'll just elaborate the question. I think I'll just elaborate the question slightly differently. That I think what he's trying to understand is in a typical organization, there are multiple sources of getting feedback, right? There's customer support, there is business stakeholders, different sources who are essentially informing you that I need this, or this is where the problem lies. So as Greg, what are the different sources within an organization do you look at when you're making a judgment call on what should be built, or when you're grooming the backlog, or you're broadly setting a strategy? I suppose that is the question that he was trying to ask.
Okay, so so I would separate internal and external stakeholders. I would still start with the problems that I'm trying to identify. If I'm looking for, I guess the question is, it's very contextual, but you obviously want to get as much information from the horse's mouth as you can. So if you can actually this is a great time to, talk about. One thing is, you can talk to customers that you already have. They can give you insight, but you have to also find a way to talk to the market, the people who haven't bought your product yet. And that is very difficult to do. It's time consuming. So what I always looked for were proxies. So I will give you an example. I was in the B2B space. I worked on an integration server that allows different systems to talk to each other, basically exchange data between them. We had an incubation project, and there was just no time to go out and talk to a bunch of people in the market or even customers. We were an incubation team. We were very small. So what we did was partner with system integrators. Why? Because system integrators talk to a bunch of customers, and they can summarize that for you. And they have a nice feeling kind of both sides, what the vendors are doing and what their constraints are and what the market needs. So a great resource is, if you can find proxies, people who have relationships already with the people you would like to talk to, who can summarize. And of course, things get lost in translation, lost in summary, however you want to put that. So you need to have some direct conversations. But, in terms of bang for buck, looking for these proxies, and then, industry analysts can be a very valuable resource. So people like Gartner and all those, they seem, when you first look at them, to be expensive. Even the reports are expensive. But hiring them as consultants can be super valuable. You will get information that you wouldn't get anywhere else. Their job is basically to understand this space. So that can be a great resource there. So once again, they are, they basically understand markets, not so much customers. They have a market perspective, so they can give you a lot of efficient feedback on what they think will work. If you have a good relationship with them, they will tell you what your competitors are up to, which can be very interesting. But those are two sources. And then internally, you're typically going to start with the people who are closest to the customer. And in a big company, especially like an enterprise company, a really untapped resource in my experience is consulting. So if you have a consulting organization that's out implementing your product or adjacent products, they know a lot about what customers want. They have very practical experience about how it works and what the shortcomings are, what works really well. And I spent a good chunk of my career as a consultant and almost never spoke to product people. And that is just a failure. I consider it a leadership failure, but any way you look at it, it's a failure. And I've been in situations on the product management side where the consulting organization wanted to charge me the time that their consultants spent with me. So there you've got completely different kind of incentive models. But internally, you want to get close to the customer. Consulting has a special perspective on it, and I would definitely talk to them. Sales understands a lot about it. They don't always have the detail that's needed, and they have an agenda. So they're most interested in what will help them meet their quota, not necessarily what the product really wants. So yeah, I would start at the customer and kind of work my way back, and then try to do direct engagement with external stakeholders and lean on others. So in big companies, I was usually able to get marketing to kind of manage the logistics around talking to analysts. That saved me a lot of time and effort. I basically just prepared and showed up to the meeting. So I hope there's some insight in there. I hope that does a better job of addressing your question.
Fantastic. I really liked your answer, Greg. I think if I can summarize what you just said, start from the customer and then move out in concentric circles, depending on how much resource and how much time, how much money you can spend, and try to reach as close as possible to the customer in the time that you have.
Yeah, and to save time and money, find proxies, find smart people who know a lot, who are willing to, just kind of organically synthesize this information and give you insights that might take you weeks or months to get, or, yeah.
Awesome. Piyush, please go ahead. Go ahead to the next question.
Yeah. Next, we have a question from Sakshay. You want to ask, what do you recommend for dealing and meeting expectations while changing requirements?
Yeah, so I guess, managing the expectations of stakeholders while requirements or, even feature delivery is changing. That's how I interpret the question. Yeah, that's a tough one. If you've got in a very dynamic kind of environment, it's very easy for important people to get disappointed. And there are a couple of things I would say. One is that stakeholders tend to be a lot more patient if they do understand the overall motivation, if they have some understanding of what you are trying to achieve, and if you've had a strong position about that in the past. So if they know the direction you're heading and they're asking for something that you can make the case is kind of off that direction, they're a lot more likely to understand what's going on if you put it in those terms. And I'm sure, in our careers, if we've been at this long, we've all had to do this. It's like, I know you want that and it makes sense for you, but it's just not the direction we're going. We're pursuing other things. So this broader kind of context around what you're trying to achieve, this motivation is really important. And then just really consistent communication. So you can't have one conversation where you get a requirement and then the only time you talk to them is when you can't meet it. You have to have, you have to develop some relationships. So, if we look at this the other way, that the problem is you've got stakeholders and they're constantly changing their requirements. Yeah, you have got to give them very clear insight into the impact of changing a requirement. And the worst example is executive leadership. They are a stakeholder, and I've seen them randomize entire, groups of 80 developers just because they went to a customer meeting and heard some buzzword. If you have stakeholders and their, customers, partners, whatever, and their requirements are changing all the time, or a CEO, your job is to go back to them and reflect, what the impact is of these new requirements. And, the basic rule is, yeah, you can put something in, but something else is coming out. We have scheduled ourselves full time, so we have a little wiggle room. We can do some above the bar work to make some little things happen here. But every time you come to us with a new thing, there's a whole chain of activity that happens. We have to see how feasible it is. We have to make sure we have the capacity the competency to do it. You know, it's not a matter, a lot of people, especially salespeople, just imagine that when they come up with a requirement, some geek goes off in a corner over the weekend and just implements it. They don't understand how, for example, software gets built, how integration testing works, how requirements have to be specified, blah, 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 blah. So I don't know if it's just because it's the end of day on Friday. I'm having trouble maybe a little bit understanding the questions, but I hope there was something valuable in what I shared.
I think that makes sense, Greg. I think it was relevant to the question, pretty much.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Next, we have question from Akash. According to you, what should be the key KRA of a product manager?
The key what?
Key KRA of a product manager.
I don't understand. I'm sorry.
Greg, key KRA. So KRA as in the OKRs and KRAs?
Of a product manager, like what are the key kind of outcomes? And
exactly.
Yeah. Wow. You know, obviously that's pretty contextual, but yeah. So, yeah, that seems really contextual, and it's a very tricky question because we tell ourselves that we're mini CEOs, that we have end-to-end accountability. Most of us are expected to at least participate in running a successful product business. But in reality, when we look at how we're measured, if I were to take everybody on the call and you sent me your annual objectives, they would probably not reflect the way product management holds itself out a little bit. So, you know, backing up and getting very high level, this is the way I look at it. In a mature organization, there will be a set of people who are responsible for getting the product on the shelf. And there is a completely different set of people who are responsible for getting it off the shelf. That's just reality. That can be software, hardware, shoes, pencils, anything. You will get to a certain level of maturity where somebody's working very hard to make sure that it's available to the market, and somebody else is, you know, spending all their time making sure it gets off the shelf and into customers' hands. So you can look at your key accountability in reality, you know, around getting the right product to the right market at the right time at the right cost. So that is a mouthful, but that's what it comes down to. And there are a lot of techniques to doing that, defining a strategy, working well with engineering, having a vision, understanding the problems. But if I look at most of my experiences in Europe and the US, product managers are measured on their ability to get what they say they can get to market. So if you say you're going to get these 5 things, these 5 features, whatever it is to market, you're measured on whether or not you actually do that. So I would just call out, maybe I'm belaboring the point, but I know very few product managers. This is changing a little, but just a little. I know very few product managers whose compensation is based on the performance of their product. It sounds radical and a little crazy, but it's true. If you sell twice what you expected, most product managers don't expect twice the bonus. And if the thing just completely goes down the toilet, you know, product managers don't expect for their pay to fall drastically. Sometimes that's by design, but I think the key objectives need to be around defining what needs to be delivered to market and getting it off the shelf. And then you will find, you know, very few product managers that I know are involved in, for example, sales planning. So the people who are getting it off the shelf are a different set of people. They're incented a different way. They think a different way. And one of the key, you know, dysfunctions in product teams are when the on-the-shelf people are not communicating effectively with the off-the-shelf people. You can have a killer product and get it on the shelf. If you don't have the right communication or the people incented to get it off, you will fail. You can, for a time, put crap on the shelf, rotten fruit, and you can find people who are smart enough to sell it, but eventually that will catch up with you as well. So I won't get much more specific than that, but for product managers, in reality, most of your outcomes should be about figuring out the right thing to get on the shelf and getting it there at the right time. And then, you have a much bigger lever over cost than revenue. So doing that primarily in terms of engineering effort at a cost that will support a sustainable business, or that a business that is successful, and you should have a key role in defining what success is for your product business. How do you measure success? That's what I would say. That's my answer.
Awesome. I think you nailed it. I think in terms of key responsibility areas, it's very easy to get down to a list, but at the end of the day, what matters is, are you shipping or not? And are you shipping a meaningful product or not? I think
That's it. Are you shipping the right thing at the right time for the right cost?
Exactly.
That's the question.
Exactly. I'll pick the next question because it's slightly difficult to explain. So I think it's more of a program management problem. That if the program is based around security risk mitigation, such as securing all personal cell phone connected to enterprise, essentially a device management program that has to be done. So how would you position the product to the stakeholders? This kind of product to stakeholders. Now, I'm not sure. And David, please feel free to explain here. When you say stakeholders, do you mean internal stakeholders, or you're building a product for other enterprises? That is not very clear from the question.
Yeah, let me explain. So it's more on the, can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so it's more of a nebulous program. So I'm sure, Greg, you've probably been in these situations where internally an enterprise wants to do something, and it's, in this case, it's making sure that all the entire, every asset is secure, that is connected to network, so we don't get bombarded by hackers. The problem is when you put it in terms of what you're doing, it seems like there isn't a product. Now, to me, I've looked at it and I see each individual electronic, say a phone, as a product itself. But around there's a lot of other things that patches, etc., etc. And I'm trying to split this program into two, where one is the product itself, and the rest of it is more operational. So really, I guess the key word is that this is nebulous, and it's very hard to position it with our stakeholders, and it's the stakeholders that are actually requesting this. Does that make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And my answer may just sound like kind of pat based on everything I've said. But, if I were consulting with you, the first thing I would look at is, do you really understand your stakeholders, who they are, what their interests are, and what their problems are? So do you understand their problems? And, that might be that, a CEO of the company could be hugely embarrassed and lose his job if there's some big data breach that starts with devices or something. Mm-hmm. There's the head of security. There's the head of IT who may be commissioning the devices and giving them to people. So the first thing I would want to see is, do you really understand, based on these stakeholders, do you understand their problems? And if you map them to these kind of buying prototypes, do you know who is making the decisions? So who does this thing impact? And you will probably come up with at least 5 or 6 people, including the people who have the devices. The exercise I go through is figuring out very specifically what their problems are and validating those problems with them. You are whatever, you are the head of this business unit. I think these, relative to device security, these are your biggest problems. Am I right? And you won't be. They will have something, right? They will have something that you haven't thought of.
Yeah, that sounds very clear.
Yeah, and then your job is to figure out, are you really building something that is going to address their problems? Because in that case, being really simplistic, you could design something that makes the end users, the device owners, super happy, and IT just doesn't even want to deploy it or will sabotage it because it whatever. There are a million reasons that could happen. So, as a product manager, the chain is, and this is kind of iterative. Actually, I would start with a problem. From the problem, you start figuring out who the stakeholders are, and we're talking about problems here. You start getting an idea of the stakeholders. You do some analysis and validation that you understand the most important problems per stakeholder. And then your job is to figure out, what is your value proposition? What is the value you are going to promise each one of those users to make them happy? And you have to have an understanding of the relative, kind of importance. And an example I can give you, I worked at SAP that has some of the worst UI you've ever seen in your life. I don't know if you've had to work with SAP, it's really dreadful. But they weren't selling to end users. They were selling to, corporate leadership. They were selling to executives. They were selling to the people who manage end users. And the fact that end users had to use it and had to be usable for the longest time was just an afterthought. By then they had burned through a lot of money and energy. What they had to demonstrate. I'm sorry?
Seen that before.
Yeah. So, I would want to see, if I were working with you, I'd want to see your stakeholder analysis. I would want to see the problems that you've analyzed and validated. I would want to see the value proposition that you plan to create. And then you have all the materials to go back to them and play this as a story, to tell them a story.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh, I think we have more questions that we can take, I think, in the time provided. So one is about career.pm. So transitioning from other engineering role to PM role, what roles companies do look at? So somebody with a past experience of a developer or programmer or a coder, if you want to transition to PM, what roles companies offer, or what exactly are companies looking at?
Yeah.
How to make an impact in the first interview, and lastly, how career.pm creates an impact.
So as an engineer trying to get into product management, I would try to do it in the organization where I'm working. Working as a product owner is usually a step in that direction if they are using Scrum. It's a great way to do it. Very often product owners still report to engineering, so you're changing roles, not organizations. And once you show impact there, you kind of will find yourself. You won't have to go looking for opportunities. They will find you. Because I can tell you that in general, finding good PM people in the open market is a nightmare for most companies because they want experience. So they get desperate kind of, and they will first take people that are in the engineering organization who have shown some aptitude for understanding the business, understanding customers. And I think, depending on your situation, an important aspect of that is being transparent about what you want. That can be hard sometimes, but talking to your leadership and saying, hey, I love my job, I'm committed to this job, but let's say over the next 2 or 3 years, I would like to move towards something that's more customer and business oriented. So let the organization know, let your management know, let the PM organization know. And then all the time, develop your skills. In terms of impact during an interview, I think the most important thing that, as an engineer, you need to show is that you can take off the engineering hat and think like a functional business person, and that you have passion for that. What people do not want is to bring on an engineer and have them to continue acting like an engineer. You have to show that, hey, I'm great at engineering. Yesterday, I had my engineering hat on. Today, I'm sitting here with you and I've got my business functional hat on. And I know the difference between them, and I can talk to you as this kind of functional person. And of course, there are a million kind of interview techniques beyond that. But first, you have to establish that you're not just a technician, that you understand business and the functional side of creating, creating a product business. The last question, career.pm, is an effort to get product managers and aspiring product managers to treat their career the way they treat their product. So as a product manager, you understand that your product needs a strategy, a motivation model. Your product needs a roadmap, or nobody's going to be able to validate, buy off on it. You're not going to be able to plan. You have to really look at the gaps in your product and fill them over time to make the market happy. And the same thing goes for your career. Product managers should be the best career managers in the world, and they're not. So what career.pm does is pair you with somebody with some experience, helps you create this professional motivation and literally a career roadmap, and then gives you somebody who's in your corner to help you execute that thing. And, you know, PMs have different needs than aspiring PMs, but that is the basic idea, is that we will help you, you know, create this roadmap, and then we will help you move through that roadmap as quickly as possible based on very smart, caring, experienced people. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, that does. Thank you so much, Greg, for answering that. Okay, I'll take one more question, pretty much the last one. So Sarthak wants to know that in your experience, you would have met a lot of star product managers or people that you got inspired from, or you were pretty impressed with. What are the common characteristics you saw in them?
Well, there are, you know, a bunch of different things. I talked earlier about time management. So the best product managers I've seen are able to just brutally just not participate in things. They know what they need to do, and no matter what, they get it done. And it's not extra effort. I don't respect that personally. People who work 90 hours a week, like, you know, I just don't think that's sustainable. But people who work a normal number of hours and are just able to brutally tell people no, their manager says, I need you to go talk to this customer, and they say no. I am getting ready, or we're about to launch, or I am getting preparing for this event, which is much happier. I am not going. Obviously, people who have a high kind of emotional IQ, people who are very empathetic, and who can work with other people and do it without alienating them. This is something I kind of suffer from. For a long time, my nickname was the bulldozer, and that was not meant as a compliment. So I really like people who are able to do their job and develop relationships with people, because as a product manager, you have to lead, but you don't have authority. And that leaves you leading by, you know, based on the relationships you have. People do what you want to do because they believe in you. So most of it, I don't care so much about technical skills and all that. I like strategic thinkers, but the things that really set people apart from me are those things. They manage their time, they focus, they know what they need to do, and they get it done. And they're not alienating everybody while they're doing it. They're able to build relationships and, you know, get respect from people and lead based on the respect that people have from them.
Awesome. I think I loved your answers, Greg, honestly. I love the fact that you have brought a very human side of product management. A lot of discussions, a lot of talks I've heard in the past where it's very clinical, but what you have spoken about today is very human, very, you know, on the job, what really happens and what is supposed to be done. Love the fact that you brought that side out. Piyush, please go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we have run over time. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we're a few minutes over. It was such a pleasure. It was really an honor to speak to you guys today. And if anybody has questions or just wants to chat, I'm really easy to find. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I do a lot of the conversations, and more than happy to, you know, time allowing, talk to folks and connect with folks.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, Greg, for joining us, and thanks a lot everyone for participating in the session today. So I would like to give you a little brief about what Pragmatic Leader does. So we are a school of product management here, and we help you transition into product management. So we are doing a lot of these webinars, and we are running a webinar series for product managers. So you can anytime reach out to me if you are looking for transition or upskilling. And we also run a product community on Slack. So I'm sharing the link in description. You can join our product community. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, because all of these session recordings are published at our YouTube channel. And apart from this, there are a lot of upcoming webinars, these kind of interesting webinars. So you can check them out. I'm sharing the link in chat section. And thanks a lot, Greg, once again for joining us. It was
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Take care, guys. Bye.
Thank you so much, Greg. And yeah,
Thank you.
I'll be sending